Welcome to episode 110 of the Charm City Birdwatch podcast. Going to be doing things a little bit different this week. Ian is not able to do the show with me, so found this out yesterday. Today's Saturday. We always record on a Saturday. Found this out on Friday. He's got a really busy weekend going on, some big major house repairs going on. He showed me, saw some pictures of it on social media. It's pretty crazy. So wishing him the best getting his house back in order, but that's going to be a jam-packed weekend for him. So couldn't find a time to record, but the show must go on. And I've always kind of wanted to do a solo show just to try it out, just to see how it would go. It might be a disaster, I don't know. But we actually had quite a bit of news this week that I can sink my teeth into. So I think this is going to be pretty fun. So we're going to try a solo show, see how it goes. I can already hear everyone clicking off of this, everyone saying, no, I want nothing to do with this. Get me away from Nolan as soon as possible. This guy has such a boring voice. But if you're going to stick around, I appreciate it. We're going to see how it goes because I have no idea how it's going to go. But I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And like I said, there's a lot to talk about. I'm going to start with Patrick Mahomes. I mean, that's been the biggest news this week, but there has been just so much that has happened this week. And unfortunately, can't talk about it with Ian, but we'll get his opinion on some of the stuff next week when he comes back. But we're also going to talk about something that we did a couple weeks ago on the podcast when it first went up. The Ravens are doing a 25th anniversary fan vote to pick the all-time Ravens team. We made our selections a couple weeks ago on the show, so if you missed that, you can go back and listen to it. But now, a couple weeks later, it has been revealed, the final votes, who has made the all-time team. And this had social media in an uproar the other day when this came out. Not surprised. There were going to be a couple snubs, if you want to call them that, on the list, so we'll get into that. And as far as baseball, I do want to talk about the Orioles because we are back underway. How are the Orioles doing? Their schedule has been released. We didn't have that last week, so we can talk about that. Some of the notes from Orioles summer camp or spring training 2.0. They've been doing inter-squad games this week, gearing up for the return of baseball, hopefully later this month. And I say hopefully because the biggest thing we have to talk about with baseball is all of the issues they have right now with testing, just all of the issues in general. Things have been a little bit bumpy as they get going here with Spring Training 2.0 and summer camp. And then we're going to wrap up the show. This is something I want to try out moving forward. When we have some smaller stories, something that we usually aren't going to have much of a back and forth on, something that there isn't really much to talk about, but we can give a quick thought on it. I'm going to do like a quick hits segment at the end of every show. And since, like I said, there's so much to talk about this week, I threw in a bunch of quick hits at the end here that are going to range from Orioles stuff, Ravens stuff, and NFL as a whole stuff, even some Terp stuff. So we will talk about all that. But as I said, let's start with Mahomes because that was the big news this week. Patrick Mahomes has signed, if you haven't heard by now, I'm sure we all have, but a 10-year extension in addition to his 2 remaining rookie years that are left on his rookie deal. The approximate value is going to change year to year based on the salary cap. There's some clause in place that is going to prevent him from dipping below a certain percentage of the salary cap, so it's going to work out for him for the entire 10 years. They put in some safety valves for him. He's not going to get screwed over when the salary cap expands in years to come as we expect it to. But roughly, everyone's estimating this to be around $500 million for the entire 10 years. Absolutely unprecedented. Never seen anything like it in the NFL. This is something we're much more accustomed to seeing in baseball. Guys like Mike Trout, Bryce Harper, Manny Machado getting these types of deals to stick around and be with one team for a decade. That's the sport where we're used to seeing this. NFL, this is unheard of. But if there was a player that was going to do this, you would think it would be a quarterback. And then when you start thinking about quarterbacks right now that would be in line to get this type of deal, it's got to be Mahomes, right? I mean, who else has done what this guy has done? Right now, nobody. I mean, Lamar's got the MVP, just like Mahomes. Doesn't have the Super Bowl, though. So you look back through NFL history, how many quarterbacks have done what Mahomes has done in just 2 years in the league? Has won a Super Bowl, been named a Super Bowl MVP in addition to that, and won regular season MVP. How many quarterbacks in history have done that? Not a lot. 12, 13, I think. And all of those guys that have done that are either currently in the Hall of Fame, or I think there's 3 guys that aren't in the Hall of Fame, and they will be there one day. Brady's done it. Peyton Manning's done it. Aaron Rodgers has done it. Those guys will all be in the Hall of Fame one day. So that leaves Mahomes and he's just getting his career started, as the only one on that list that isn't guaranteed Hall of Fame, but he's in pretty elite company. So based on what he's done in such a short amount of time, let's get this right out of the way right off the bat. He earned this deal. There's no question about it. Can't deny it. Whether you think this was a poor decision for the Chiefs or not, we'll get into that. I have my thoughts, but you can't say he didn't earn this deal. Look, we know very well here in Baltimore, Joe Flacco was the highest paid quarterback in the NFL at one point. And I know people are sick of hearing that because it gets brought up time and time again, but it's true. That's just how quarterback contracts work. That's how all contracts work in the NFL. Guys constantly one-upping each other. Who's going to have the highest deal? It changes year to year. It wasn't just Joe. Matt Stafford was the highest paid quarterback at one point. Matt Ryan. You might think those guys are pretty good quarterbacks. Might think they're both better than Flacco. But there's no way they're the best quarterback in the league when they were paid the highest in the league. But that's just how it works. So here we are, Mahomes' 10-year deal, $500 million. It's still insane to me. I mean, it's been probably almost a full week since this news came out, and I'm still stunned. I mean, to insert now my personal opinion, Mahomes definitely earned a big deal like this, but 10 years? I think the Chiefs are insane. I think the Chiefs are crazy. I mean, this is just stupid beyond belief. Why are you trying to predict what's going to happen 7-8 years from now? You can't. This is the ultimate gamble. A regular 5-year contract is usually a gamble for what's going to happen. 10 years? Even more of a gamble. So I just think this is insane. Here we are, though. And a lot of people are already talking here in Baltimore, especially because, with Lamar Jackson in town, the big question is, what's he going to get paid? We assume he's going to, if things follow suit, the way they always have in the NFL, as I was just saying, constant one-upping or constant matching, Lamar is going to command at least a similar payday to what Mahomes got here. Now, with that being said, I think a lot of people are misconstruing things, are a little quick on the draw, and they're automatically assuming that the Ravens are going to have to shell out a 10-year deal to Lamar. That's not the case. One, I don't even know if Lamar wants a 10-year deal. Quite honestly, I'm a little surprised Pat Mahomes wanted a 10-year deal. Now, again, this has obviously worked out for him. He has all the clauses in there. It's pretty much foolproof for him. He's protected from a money standpoint. He's got guarantees in there. I think he's got injury guarantees. I don't even know. I mean, he is protected. His ass is covered. But I don't know why the average player in this era where players are constantly saying, get me out of here, trade me to another team. It's such a fluid situation in the NFL. Teams usually don't remain the same. You usually don't have the same core more than 3-4 years. And it's a completely different team. You don't know where the Chiefs are going to be. I mean, they might win another Super Bowl this year. They might three-peat. Who knows? After that, what's going to happen to the team? You still got Mahomes for another 7-8 years. And your team might fall apart. How long is Andy Reid going to be the coach? What impact is a new coach going to have on things? To me, this is such a ridiculous deal for the Chiefs. Mahomes clearly wanted 10 years. He wouldn't have signed if he didn't want it. I think we have a blank check scenario here where he sits down in negotiations and, says, this is what I want, and the team's not going to give him much pushback. I mean, they're going to try to fight it a little bit. That's how negotiations go, but ultimately, he's writing his own check here. So he wanted 10 years, they gave him 10 years. But I don't know what other players in the league would want a deal like that. Does Lamar want a deal like that? Time will tell. And I think that's where everyone's freaking out right now, but they are definitely jumping the gun. Everyone's freaking out because they think this is going to set the standard for NFL contracts, at least when it comes to the quarterback moving forward. I don't see this making its way into other position groups. It's just not feasible right now. With the salary cap, it just nothing's impossible, but a team would be really stupid to sign a wide receiver, cornerback, offensive lineman, whoever it is, for that long. It's just ridiculous. But a quarterback sort of makes sense. That's your guy. That's the face of your franchise. That's who you're building your offense around, your entire team around. I get it. But like I said, everyone's assuming that this is going to become the standard. I'm not seeing that. Because again, I don't know if players really want this. I think a lot of players, a lot of quarterbacks would be content with a 5-year deal, money equivalent of that, so 5 years, $250 million. I think that's the range that Lamar is going to be in. And I seriously hope, I am okay as of right now, let it be known. What Lamar's done, hasn't won a playoff game yet, I don't care. I've seen enough. I know the type of athlete he is. I know the type of quarterback he is. I know this team can win multiple Super Bowls easily with Lamar Jackson at quarterback. He gives them a great chance to do so. You look at the offense they built around him. It's nothing crazy, but they had the best running game in the league, and the receivers are pretty efficient. I've said it time and time again on this podcast. Everyone's talking about how they need to make serious upgrades at wide receiver. I'd welcome it. I'd always welcome an upgrade. But I didn't think the wide receiver group was trash, like a lot of people have said it was. I mean, that's how good Lamar is as a passer. And we'll get into this. I didn't mention it at the top of the show. I'm going to stray off of this for a little bit, but we are going to get into this insane ESPN quarterback ranking list. I just started talking about Lamar as a passer, and that jogged my memory. We'll get to that. Don't worry. But for now, this Mahomes deal, what's this going to do for Lamar in the future? Only time will tell, obviously. But I seriously hope the Ravens don't try to go more than 5 years. 6 years, whatever, sure. I think that's unconventional. I think 5 is the standard. That's what you go with. Negotiations are going to start heating up in the next year or so. Lamar's the guy. Sign him. 5 years, $250 million. No questions asked. No pushback from me. None whatsoever. 10-year deal, if he wants it. Now things are looking a little dicey. It's not an easy cut and dry decision to say, no, we're not doing that, let him go. Because again, you're looking at Lamar frickin' Jackson. No one can do what he does. So again, he kind of has the Mahomes factor here where he can walk in to DaCosta's office and write his own check if he wants. But I'm going to be a little disappointed if the Ravens end up doing something similar here because, again, you have no guarantee. You have no idea what your team's going to look like. You have a vision, and DaCosta's been pretty good at executing on his vision of what he wants this team to look like. But you have no idea what this team's going to look like 3 years from now, let alone 7, 8, 9, 10 years from now. And no one wants to hear this. And I'm not usually this guy, but the style of play that Lamar Jackson has, where he is a dual threat quarterback and he does quite a bit of running, and it is his asset, and I definitely think they should continue to run him, without a doubt, because he's been pretty good at protecting himself. There's a play here or there where he doesn't, but for the most part, he's doing everything he can to protect himself. But based on his style of play, I'm not giving him a 10-year deal. A 5-year deal is, I don't want to use the term risky, but you don't know where he's going to be 4 or 5 years from now. You don't know what's going to happen. Any quarterback can get injured. It's not a mobile quarterback thing. Any quarterback can suffer an injury. Alex Smith, look at the injury he suffered. That's extreme. That's on the extreme end of the spectrum. But he's a pocket passer. Anything can happen. You just don't know. Heaven forbid something happens to Lamar, knock on wood. But I'm not giving him a 10-year deal. Look at Cam Newton. Excellent dual-threat quarterback. Look at how he exploded onto the league. Number 1 overall pick, coming out of Auburn. Fantastic player. Exploded into the NFL. Ends up winning MVP in 2015. They went 15-1 that year. Go all the way to the Super Bowl, lose. But a fantastic season for Cam Newton. He suffered a couple injuries. He's had a chance to get his career back on track in New England this year with a bounce-back year, but he's not the same. He'll never be the same. He can still be a good quarterback, but he's not what he was in 2015. And his chances of getting back to that are pretty slim. Again, I just don't see how you can reasonably give Lamar Jackson a 10-year deal, because I don't know where he's going to be 4 or 5 years from now, let alone 7, 8, 9, 10 years from now. I don't know where the Ravens are going to be. Is Harbaugh still going to be the coach? Same thing with Andy Reid. You just don't know. Is DeCosta going to be able to draft well enough to maintain a good team, because you're not going to have the money to sign free agents? One more thing on this contract, because people are jumping the gun, and it's mostly here in Baltimore because, again, Lamar's our guy. We're concerned about the future. We're kind of oblivious, ignoring things outside of Baltimore. You know, this story with Mahomes is so pertinent, so relevant to Lamar. But take a second to step back, realize that Lamar is not next up. There are at least 2 quarterbacks that are going to sign between now and then, maybe more. Dak Prescott, still trying to work out a deal for the Cowboys. Thoughts and prayers to the Cowboys right now and Jerry Jones. Actually, never mind. I don't care about Jerry Jones. But I do not envy him right now. They waited too long to work out a deal with Dak. Now Mahomes is signed. And obviously, where I'm going with this is the Cowboys are not going to sign Dak Prescott to a 10-year deal. So right then and there, you have something that is going to buck the trend or go against the grain or go against what people are fearful or anticipating is going to become the trend. Dak's not getting a 10-year deal, but he is going to be in line for what I was just talking about, 5 years, $250 million, because the Cowboys waited too long. Now he can say, I want Mahomes money for 5 years. And the Cowboys are like, I don't know. We were already having questions about you around $200 million. $250? Ooh. And we already paid Amari Cooper and Zeke? Ooh. Jeez. Don't envy him. I don't. But that's their problem. And the other quarterback is Deshaun Watson. Came into the league in 2017. So he will be up a year sooner than Lamar. What are they going to do? Presumably right now, a lot of people have him in that same conversation as Lamar. Again, going to tease this ridiculous ESPN list. Some people think he's better than Lamar. He's in that conversation. Far worse quarterbacks have gotten paid as the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. Deshaun Watson will definitely be in that group. But he's a little different than Dak. Does he command a 10-year deal? Do they get something done in the next year or so, a little early, and extend him 10 years? Bill O'Brien and the Texans have been known to do some stupid things. Wouldn't surprise me at all. Would not surprise me at all for them to do that. But they've got some concerns there. I mean, look, I was just talking about how is Lamar going to hold up for 10 years. There's no guarantee any quarterback holds up for 5 years. So I'm not giving anyone 10. But look at Deshaun Watson. They can't protect him at all. No offensive line. Got Laramie Tunsil. That's it. Atrocious offensive line as a whole. I mean, look at the game they played the Ravens last year. Look at all the pass rush, and the Ravens' pass rush last year was extremely suspect at times. outside of Matt Judon, extremely suspect. And they just had no issues getting to Deshaun Watson. No issues at all. And that wasn't just one game. That's the entire year. It's been Deshaun Watson's entire career, quite frankly, has never had a good offensive line. So to his credit, he's done some incredible, amazing things as a dual-threat quarterback in this league with an atrocious offensive line. So give him credit for that. But giving that guy a 10-year deal, you better protect him, because he's not gonna last 5 years at the rate he's going. At some point, someone's gonna knock his block off. But those two quarterbacks are up for a deal before Lamar. Will they exceed that $250 million 5-year mark? Lamar's going to walk into DaCosta's office with a blank check. And he's got the MVP. We talked about this with Mahomes. And again, easier said than done, winning a Super Bowl. But they're certainly a favorite to do so. And you would think if the Ravens win the Super Bowl, barring something crazy happening in the game, Lamar's going to win MVP of the Super Bowl. If they win the Super Bowl, he's going to be named MVP. That's how it works. If they get that done, he's now etched his name amongst, right alongside Pat Mahomes and all of those other guys that are currently in the Hall of Fame or will be in the Hall of Fame one day. That's blank check material. So we'll move on. I've said enough. Probably lingered way too long on this, but we'll move on. Let's, while we're on the subject of the quarterbacks, and because I've already teased it twice, let's just talk about this ESPN quarterback list. Let's get it out of the way. It's ridiculous. Everyone's already ripped it apart. If you haven't seen it, ESPN put out a list. Top 10 quarterbacks right now in 2020. This isn't a list, like Dan Orlovsky was saying, these are the guys that are going to have the best career trajectory or whatnot. No, this is right now. Who do you want? 2020, rank them. ESPN gathered 50 league executives, coaches, scouts, and players, came together, ranked the top 10 quarterbacks. And Lamar Jackson is not number 1. Okay. Not number 2. All right. Not number 3. That's a little weird. It's got to be number 4, right? No. Well, he's at least top 5. No. He's number 6. Yeah, I said that correctly. Number 6. And if you want a little behind the curtain here, a little behind the scenes on how the voting went, because again, this was 50 people voting and ranking. The highest that Lamar was ranked by any of those 50 people was number 2. So no one had him at number 1. The lowest he was ranked, number 12. Whoever you are out of that group of 50 league executives, coaches, scouts, players, whoever it was that had him at 12, remove yourself from the game run as far away as possible from the game of football. Please. Get away from it. You have no business being associated with the NFL. You have no business being associated with Pee-wee football. Nothing. Get away from it. You have no business playing fantasy football. Remove the word football from your life. If you think Lamar Jackson is the number 12, you think there's 11 better quarterbacks right now in the NFL than Lamar Jackson, remove yourself from the conversation, please. And I know right now this is a very sensitive thing. In 2020, we've had a lot of conversations about race this year, relevant conversations. And I know this has been a conversation about Lamar so far in his career, being the victim of some, whether it's overt racism or subtle, if you want to call it that, maybe not as obvious racism, where people think that a black quarterback can't be the guy. I think that trend was bucked long ago, but look at how Lamar was evaluated coming out of college. Look at how Lamar was evaluated or talked about even after he played a handful of NFL games and won a handful of NFL games. Look at how they talked about him. Look at how some people still talk about him after he won MVP, for God's sake. Led the league in passing touchdowns, not rushing touchdowns, passing touchdowns, and people still call him a running back. Someone still said that he's number 12. Thought there's 11 quarterbacks better than Lamar Jackson right now. Ridiculous. So if you want the top 10, here it is. Matt Stafford at 10. Dak Prescott at 9. Carson Wentz at 8. Tom Brady at 7. Lamar at 6. Here's your top 5. These 5 guys, they think, as a consensus, as an average, are better than Lamar Jackson. Drew Brees at 5. Deshaun Watson at 4. Aaron Rodgers at 3. Russell Wilson at 2. And Mahomes at 1, obviously. Let's get this out of the way real quick. Mahomes at 1, no issue. Russell Wilson at 2, no issue. If you want to say both those guys are better than Lamar Jackson, I will not argue with you. They are tremendous quarterbacks. I would love for either of them to be the quarterback of the Baltimore Ravens if we didn't have Lamar Jackson. But from there, I've got a problem. Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, and Drew Brees, no. I've got Lamar ahead of all 3. If you want to argue for one of them to be ahead, maybe. But quite frankly, having Aaron Rodgers at 3, this guy is still riding the fumes, still riding high off of what he did a couple years ago. And Aaron Rodgers is a good quarterback. Let's not get that construed. He's not a bum. He's a good quarterback. And the Packers have done very little to give him legit weapons on the level that a Drew Brees has, on the level that Deshaun Watson had. They ruined that. He hasn't had those bona fide guys. They haven't drafted a receiver for him in the first round since he's been there. I think maybe once they did it, but I don't think they've drafted him a receiver. They've given him free agents. They've given him retreads, and he's done phenomenal stuff. They won the Super Bowl. He's been MVP. Aaron Rodgers has been a great quarterback throughout his career, future Hall of Famer. But in 2020, he is not better than Lamar Jackson. He's just not. I don't want anyone to have that conversation with me. Same thing with Deshaun Watson, who, this is the egregious one. As bad as I think Rodgers at 3 is, Deshaun Watson being a similar style quarterback to Lamar. Dual threat, young, came into the league around the same time, same type of skill set, very easy to compare them. How can you have Deshaun Watson ahead of Lamar Jackson? I said it just a minute ago. I mean, he's done great things with a terrible offensive line, but he's had DeAndre Hopkins, for God's sake. Who does Lamar Jackson have in his 2 years? Look at the receivers he's had. Willie Snead, Michael Crabtree. Good Lord. John Brown. I like John Brown. He's not a stud. He's not a number 1 wide receiver. A rookie hobbled Marquise Brown. Moving forward, Marquise might end up being on that Hopkins, Julio Jones, the elite level. We'll see. The sky's the limit. We've said that. But so far in Lamar's career, his best receivers have been his tight ends, particularly Mark Andrews. And then the run game has obviously been more dominant than the pass game. But I just don't know how, looking at what Lamar has had, he's led the league in passing touchdowns. Just last year alone, 2019 versus 2019 season, Lamar Jackson and Deshaun Watson. Obviously, Lamar's better. He won MVP. That's no debate. But just looking at the passing stats, for Lamar, 3,100 passing yards. Deshaun Watson, 3,800. Not that surprising. Deshaun Watson had just shy of 500 passing attempts at 495. Lamar, only 400 passing attempts. That's a factor. And again, Lamar, 36 touchdowns. Deshaun Watson, 26. Interceptions. Deshaun Watson, 12. Lamar, 6. I think that speaks for itself. QB rating. Deshaun Watson, a 98 on the dot. Lamar, 113.3. There's no conversation here. That's just passing. Then you bring in the running, and Lamar's got, 1,200 rushing yards to Deshaun Watson's 400 or 500? Give me a break. No way. No way Deshaun Watson's better than Lamar Jackson. I think that's ridiculous. I think it's disrespectful to Lamar. quite frankly, it's only fueling the fire. And again, look, Deshaun Watson played, it says here 15 games started. I don't remember him missing a game last year. Maybe sat out the last week when they had locked up the postseason. I don't know. But Lamar, as we know, sat out completely against the Steelers in the last week of the season last year, but had been removed from at least 4 or 5 other games early because the Ravens were just absolutely stomping their opponent. So the total game time that Lamar missed was at least two plus games when you factor in all the quarters he missed. And he still has better stats than the rest of the league. Unanimous MVP. He was unanimous MVP for a reason. So why, out of a group of 50 people, this is, again, if this was one person ranking this, if this was a Stephen A. Smith, a Colin Coward, a Dan Orlovsky making a list on their own, just trying to get clicks, just trying to get a reaction, I can understand it, why they would have Lamar Jackson outside the top 5 just to create a debate. But this is a consensus. This is a gathering of 50 people, and you're taking all of their lists and putting them together, and the consensus then of 50 people associated with the NFL heavily, we're talking coaches and scouts here, had Deshaun Watson ahead of Lamar Jackson. I don't get it. I just don't get it. I'm baffled. The more I talk about it, the more frustrated I get. What I'm saying here is not new. It's not enlightening in any way, but I had to get it off my chest because, my God, was that ridiculous. And I think ESPN, I'm guessing they're going to go through all the major position groups. They did a running back list. Some people in the Ravens fan base, a little peeved that our guy, Mark Ingram, our good friend Mark Ingram, wasn't in the top 10. I don't think that's egregious. When you start looking at all the great running backs in the league, I mean, look, I'll read it real quick. Saquon, they had him at number 1. Christian McCaffrey, number 2. Zeke at 3. Kamara at 4. Derrick Henry, 5. Dalvin Cook, 6. Nick Chubb at 7. Joe Mixon at 8. Josh Jacobs from the Raiders at 9. And Le'Veon Bell at number 10. Look, I can't argue with like 1 through 7 or 8. I can't argue with that. I would say all those guys are pretty. I have no problem with them being listed as better than Mark Ingram. Josh Jacobs is the only one where I could really take him out and put Mark Ingram in, but that's not egregious at all. And quite frankly, I wouldn't be surprised to see Mark Ingram at number 11 comfortably. Fringe top 10. No issues. So I had that written down, but I'm not going to dwell on it because it's really, after going in on this quarterback list, it's not worth it. It's not that egregious. It's not a big deal. But if you want to stick with the social media outrage, let's talk about the Ravens all-time team. Talked about it briefly at the beginning of the show. Myself and Ian voted for our all-time teams a couple weeks ago. You can go back and listen to who we voted for. I think I remember everybody I voted for, so I'll go through it now. But if you want to hear who Ian had, you can go back and look at that. Let's start with offense. I'll try to make this as quick as possible, and we'll try to glance over the easy ones. Quarterback, all right, right off the bat, here's the one where everyone's got an issue. Lamar, your choices were between 3 people. You pick one. Who's your starting quarterback? Lamar Jackson, Joe Flacco, Vinny Testaverde. Sorry, Vinny, it's between Lamar and Joe. That's just how it is. Lamar's got the MVP. I think we all agree he's going to be a better quarterback than Joe Flacco. He's already a better quarterback than Joe Flacco. At peak Joe, Lamar's already surpassed that. You can't debate that. But this is a vote for the 25th anniversary of the Baltimore Ravens. So it's fitting that we get this out of the way right off the bat on our first position. You're picking the guy who's had the best Ravens career. It's not just the best player. There's guys that were here for a year or two that were fantastic, but they didn't have the longevity of someone else. They weren't as consistently good. They didn't embody what it is to be a Raven for so long. Look, Joe doesn't have the MVP, but took us to how many playoff runs, won the Super Bowl. That's enough right there. For the 25th anniversary, when we're talking about an anniversary team, Joe Flacco is the quarterback. Enough said. Running back Jamal Lewis, very happy to see that. I think it was between him and Ray Rice. Maybe Ray Rice's little falling out that he had there with the domestic violence thing played a factor. I was willing to have the debate because peak Ray Rice was fantastic. But Jamal Lewis, very, very good, and he was my vote. Fullback, I think our vote came to fruition here, although I think Ian had Kyle Juszczyk. But it was a tough pick at fullback. Vontae Leach ends up winning. Not really surprised. He was on the Super Bowl team. Fans loved chanting Leach whenever he would make a play. Wide receivers, this is where people had more of an issue. 2 wide receivers that were selected to the Ravens' 25th anniversary team were Anquan Boldin, so some rose-tinted glasses from the Super Bowl run, and Steve Smith. Now, if you remember back to that episode, these were the 2 guys that I initially picked. I had neglected Derek Mason, and as we have seen on social media, I am retracting what I said. I'm admitting I was wrong. Derek Mason is a better wide receiver as a Raven than Anquan Boldin and Steve Smith. Because again, Ian said this at the time, Anquan Boldin did not have the best regular seasons. He was fantastic in the Super Bowl run. I thought he was a really solid wide receiver as a whole. He was here for, 3 years? Great guy, shouldn't have traded him for what they did. And Steve Smith, I said, embodies what it is to be a Raven, one of those guys that was here for a couple of years, but just you feel like he could have been a Raven his entire career. But you got to have Derek Mason here. And I'm willing to hear the argument on Torrey Smith being a guy that was drafted here. So I'll admit I was wrong, and at least Derek Mason. But from here on out, the rest of the offense, I don't think anyone really has an issue with it. I've seen a couple people bring up some things, but it's not bad. Look, tight end was Todd Heap. Happy to see that. Could have had some recency bias and picked Mark Andrews, but could have even picked Dennis Pitta the Super Bowl year. Could have easily picked him, but I'm glad Todd Heap is there. Tackles, I thought that was a no-brainer. Jonathan Ogden and Ronnie Stanley, no doubt. 2 guards, Marshall Yanda was your lock. Who was going to be the other one? Osemele wins that one. Pretty recent. Some people had a problem with that, threw out some other names. I think I voted for Ben Grubbs, but Osemele gets it, no issues there. And then Matt Burke wins center. Let's move on to defense. 2 defensive tackles. Haloti Ngata was the lock, no doubt about it. I think myself and Ian both picked Kelly Gregg to be the other defensive tackle, but Goose made it. Tony Saragusa made it. No surprise there. Part of the first Super Bowl, part of anchoring that dominant defensive front on one of the nastiest defenses of all time. So, and the personality there, the Goose and the fun, the class clown type personality, I think helps make it there, but certainly worthy as a player, no doubt about it. Defensive end, only one defensive end here? I don't know what, I'm only seeing one defensive end. I thought we got to vote for 2. But Michael McCrary is defensive end. Okay, he was my vote. Still very high on the Ravens' all-time sack leaders chart. While only being here for 4 years, he was just a monster. I'm not debating that at all. Again, I voted for him. I thought we voted for 2 defensive tackles, but I'm not seeing another one. So, outside linebacker, Terrell Suggs, a lock. The other one was up for debate. Peter Boulware gets it. I had Jarrett Johnson. Whatever. I'm not going to argue too much about that one. I still would go with Jarrett Johnson, but Peter Boulware is very close there as second. Inside linebacker, another one, Ray Lewis, has to be there. They put C.J. Mosley next to him. I believe we went with Bart Scott on the podcast because, as Ian put it, Bart Scott pretty good outside of Baltimore. Once he left Ray Lewis and was not playing next to arguably the greatest middle linebacker of all time, still had a pretty good career in New York with the Jets. Bart Scott was a good player. He wasn't good just because he played next to Ray Lewis. Now, I guess you could say the same for C.J. Mosley because he was Ray Lewis's successor, and C.J. was pretty good. He was very solid. We had a hefty debate when he was up in free agency going into last year. Do you sign him? Do you let him go? Is the money worth it? Is it not? Ongoing debate. Ravens ended up deciding it wasn't worth it. He went to the Jets, oddly enough. Him and Bart Scott took the same path there. So I don't have a big problem with C.J. Mosley. I would have went with Bart Scott. I think there's a couple other middle linebackers that you could have put there. Cornerback, Chris McAllister. Very happy to see that the fan base is not is not sleeping on him, because I think he's slept on as an all-time great Ravens player. Chris McAllister's fantastic. He has to be there. And the other cornerback, and this was had quite a few names to pick from, Marlon Humphrey gets the nod. I think that's recency bias, although I will say I'm a huge fan of Marlon Humphrey. He's my favorite player on the Ravens right now. I think when it's all said and done, hopefully the Ravens are able to sign him long-term, but he could be on that Chris McAllister level when it's all said and done, as no doubt those two being the best cornerbacks in team history. Right now, for the 25th anniversary, I think I would have liked to have seen Jimmy Smith there or Lardarius Webb. I picked Lardarius Webb, but Jimmy Smith has been here a very long time as well. Very integral to that Super Bowl in 2012, making some huge plays at the end of the game. So either of those guys I think would have been a better pick here for the anniversary team than Marlon Humphrey. And then safety, Ed Reed again, have to have him. So the other one, kind of tough. I picked Rod Woodson. He got the nod here. Cool to see that part of the first Super Bowl run here in the early days of the team, but much better known as a Pittsburgh Steeler. You know, you could have picked Eric Weddle. I think you could have picked DeJuan Landry. Earl Thomas was in there, but I'm not picking him for just 1 year. So if you had Eric Weddle there, and I'd be interested to see how close the vote was. If you had Eric Weddle there, I got no problem with that. So Rod Woodson gets it. And then special teams, look, this was probably the easiest to predict. Justin Tucker wins the kicker, Sam Cook is the punter, and Morgan Cox is the long snapper, keeping the Wolfpack together. And then kick returner / punt returner, Jacoby Jones. No surprise. Let's talk some baseball, huh? Let's get off this football stuff. And we'll circle back to the NFL at the end because I got a couple quick hits that I want to get to. But let's get to baseball, particularly the Orioles. Last time we talked, we did not have the Orioles schedule. We now do. As far as opponents, we knew what that was going to be. 40 games against the AL East, 20 against the NL East. But now the schedule is out, and we can see just how jam-packed everything is. 60 games in 66 days. If everything goes according to plan, that's going to be tough. Now you got to factor in what happens if you have a rain delay, a rain cancellation. Things are going to get pretty messy. They will be opening up in Boston on July 24th. 7:35 first pitch. Oddly enough, I don't get that at all. I know without fans there's no reason to have your opening day game played at 2 or 3 in the afternoon, but at least started at 6:30, no later than 7. Like a normal East Coast first pitch is 7 o'clock, 7:05. Why are we doing 7:30? I don't know. Maybe it's a TV thing, but there you go, 7:35 for opening day, and it immediately reverts back to that. I think the Saturday and Sunday game there against Boston are both at 1 or 1:30, and then from that point on, all weeknight games are going to start at like 7. Personally, I mean, the Orioles talked about this when the season started. They were going to join this growing list of teams that was going to play some of their early season games in April and May. Weeknight games were going to start at 6:30 or 6 even, in an effort to try to get more attention on the games, more attention on the full game from a younger audience. You know, April, May, kids are still in school. Start the game at 6, it's over by 9. Kids can reasonably watch the whole game and still go to bed at a reasonable hour. I get that. I think that's great. As the summer progresses, you probably see more 7:30 starts. No issue there. Everyone's out of school. But now that we're in this pandemic, I just think that all bets are off right now. Why not just start this at 6? Fans are not going to be in attendance. You don't have to worry about people getting off work in time to make it to the stadium. Just start the games at 6 or 6:30. Again, 7 at the latest. I don't get 7:30 at all, but that's what they're doing. So open at Boston. Home opener is going to be on the 29th. It's part of a split 4-game series. They'll play 2 games in Miami against the Marlins, come back to Baltimore and play the remaining another 2-game series, but it's a split 4-game series. That's what I always like to call it. I don't have any comments on the schedule. It is what it is. We knew who the opponents were going to be. The AL East is going to be tough. New York, Tampa Bay are going to be going at it. Who's going to win the division? The other one's probably going to be a wild card team. But the Blue Jays, so young, so talented, they're going to be really tough to beat. And Boston still got some hitters. I don't know what their pitching staff's going to be like without David Price. Chris Sale's injured. I don't know what the story's going to be there, but everyone's better than the Orioles. We'll just say that. Every game is going to be tough for the Orioles this year. So I think the over-under set at 20 or something? Something crazy like that. I wanted to say over, but I'm not so sure right now because the schedule is just so tough for them. But who knows? If you get hot, anything can happen. Obviously, the Orioles' chances were slim. At this point, they're non-existent. We don't have expanded playoffs. The Orioles have no chance. I know we had some fun with that on the podcast, but they have no chance. Let's just don't even acknowledge that. I mean, if you want to be excited for the season, by all means, there's plenty of reason to be excited. And one thing that I found interesting, and this will help me transition into this whole summer camp as a whole, spring training 2.0, the issues they're having, but no Orioles players, prominent or minor or whatever, as far as I know, have opted out of the 2020 season. The Orioles are all in. They have all their guys ready to rumble. And I think that's interesting. And that could change, things could change. And it would not surprise me at all because let's just transition right into the greater issues here with testing and everything. We're seeing more players drop out as the days go by. Prominent players, big-name players drop out. Buster Posey was the big one from yesterday. He's a unique circumstance because he's just adopted him and his wife just adopted two twins, and they've got some health issues, some health concerns with those twins, and that's just hats off to him. Salute to Buster Posey. That's a tremendous story right there. So no question about it. I think the quote from him was, from a baseball standpoint, it was a little tough, but from a family perspective, it was a no-brainer. Couldn't have said it any better myself. Him missing this little 60-game season is not a big deal at all. Has got no issues whatsoever. Even if it was a big deal for him to miss a baseball season, still a no-brainer to protect your family. So salute to Buster Posey for that, because that is a great story, and I would love to hear more about that in the future, because that's great, the adoption thing and them being twins, and that's just awesome. So he's a big name, though. And we've got other Nick Markakis, former Oriole. He's opted out. The Braves is Freddie Freeman. Nick Markakis, I think, cited talking to Freddie Freeman, who has tested positive for the coronavirus, as a reason for sitting out. Now, I don't think Freddie Freeman has said that he's done, but if he dropped out, that would be a big deal. I think that would be a serious shot to the Braves, though. And they got a really good team there. Ronald Acuna is their best player, one of the best players in the league, in my opinion. Got some nice young pitchers. But to lose Freddie Freeman, that would be a huge, huge loss. Plus Markakis, who's not the best player, but he can play right field close to every day. And again, we know the type of player Nick Markakis is. He goes up to the plate looking to get on base. He's not looking to swing out of his shoes and hit a home run. You'd love to have a guy like Nick Markakis. Goes out there, plays the game hard every single day. When he goes up to the plate, great at-bats, great patient at-bats, looks to get on base. But yeah, you're seeing some prominent players drop out for good reason. Got no debate there. But it's just going to be interesting to see if more big names drop out. And I think everyone's kind of got their eyes on Mike Trout because he's been a little vocal about it, about this being a decision for him. He's contemplating this. He's contemplating whether he's going to sit out or not. Now, he's at all the organized team activities. He's playing inter-squad games with the Angels. I think he definitely wants to play. He's the best player in baseball. Not having him out there would be a huge loss, but at the end of the day, that's his decision. That's his family. That's his health. I think he's got a kid on the way or something. That's the big prominent factor here going into his decision. So he could very well, in the next week or so, drop out. And that would be just a huge devastating blow for the game of baseball, but it is what it is. No blame towards him, none at all. So I just think it's interesting. But the more players that drop out, will any Orioles drop out? That remains to be seen. Health issue, or it's not just family issues, like Buster Posey's got the unique case where he's got just adopted 2 kids that are maybe a little immune compromised. Mike Trout's got a child on the way. Everyone's got their reason, but it's just not a good look when we get things ramped up here in early July. Everyone comes back and goes through the intake testing, and this is right around, again, early July, so 4th of July weekend, and there's just they had these mass tests go out, and we can't get them back in a reasonable amount of time. Why this was not known ahead of time, that you were not going to be able to get a quick turnaround on these test results. You've got guys taking a test, I think according to Trevor Bauer, guys taking a spit test. That's how they're doing it. At least that's how they're doing it with the Reds, where Trevor is, every other day. And according to Bauer, he hasn't heard back about any of his results personally. He hasn't been told his personal results. The results may be into the team, but he hasn't been told. So I think we can assume if the results are in, obviously he hasn't tested positive, but no one's telling him, hey, you've tested negative. Or, hey, we got the test back, it was positive, it was negative. He hasn't heard anything. I think that's absurd. I would hope that the teams are getting these back in a reasonable amount of time, but as we saw with all the intake testing, that's just not the case. And that's just coming off so bad for baseball. This whole negotiation process back and forth between the owners and the players, Tony Clark, Rob Manfred, it was just nauseating. It was disgusting. It was sickening. We were all fed up with it. And to the point where it got to the end where we're like, oh, hey, baseball's coming back. Oh, great. Wow. I really didn't see that coming, but all right, here we are. Cool. And now we go through this. You're trying to get the game back and we're trying to play ball here at the end of the month, and we can't even get the testing down. Keep in mind, no one's traveling yet. We're having issues getting tests turned around in a reasonable amount of time. Teams haven't even started traveling yet. What's going to happen then when you got teams traveling from city to city? And now you got to send tests out from different cities, and there's only so many testing sites in the United States. Is that going to impact the turnaround? I don't know, man. It is just such a mess right now. Baseball is such a mess. I'm at a point where, and again, where I work for the fan, a lot of, my job is intertwined with the Orioles, whether it's talking about them on a regular show or actually broadcasting the games. So not having a regular 162 game season has been pretty crazy for me. Under normal circumstances, I would be plugging away doing Orioles broadcasts every night. That would be the norm. And right now we're gearing up for a 60 game season and starting to dust off some things and figure out how we're going to do the broadcasts, and the wheels are in motion, and it's great. It's exciting, but with what I'm seeing here with the tests, with what I'm seeing with more players dropping out, I am fearful. We've got major cities across the United States that are just flaring up. We've got states that are just hotbeds right now. Florida is a mess. I'm assuming New York is still pretty crazy with just a high population density. To think that this is going to have no impact on the players in those cities, I think, is a little naive. You can do everything you can to protect yourself, but again, we talked about this time and time again. Players are going to test positive. It's just going to happen. It is what it is. So I'll believe it when I see it. I will believe it when I sit down in front of the TV and I see John Means throw out that first pitch. So while we're on the subject of that, let's wrap up the show. I got a bunch of quick hits here. Mentioned John Means there. Let's just talk about him, because he has been named opening day starter. Not much to really say here. I mean, he's earned it. I have always been a guy that subscribes to the fact, unless you've got a bona fide ace that's coming back from injury or something who missed last season, you give the opening day nod to the guy that had the best season last year. And in the case of the Orioles, that's always been pretty easy because they've never had a bona fide ace. But over the years, opening day starter was Chris Tillman or whoever. I don't even know. Some of the years, I think Arrieta was probably opening day starter a couple years. Chris Tillman got it a couple years. I think Jason Hamill might have even been opening day starter one year. Who knows? But the past couple, last year was supposed to be Alex Cobb. He got injured. He couldn't do it. This year it's John Means. It's either between him and Alex Cobb, and you got to go with John Means because, again, he was your all-star last year. He was fantastic. He got Rookie of the Year votes in the American League. So shout out to John Means. Looking forward to hopefully another great year from him. And then maybe the Orioles just somehow stumbled ass backwards into a great starting pitcher somehow. And I just hope that last year was not a fluke. And they've come across a pitcher who was going into spring training last year, didn't even know if he was going to make the cut, was getting his resume in order, was getting his LinkedIn page in order to try to find another job if he needed it. And now he's an all-star pitcher on a Major League Baseball team. That's crazy. So shout-outs to John Means. Well-deserved. Looking forward to seeing him take the mound on opening day later this month. Next up here, Raheem Mostert. Last week we were talking about, who was it? David Njoku. He wants out of Cleveland. And myself and Ian, we had a little conversation about it. Again, Cleveland being in the division, in the AFC North. What does that mean? Ian wasn't surprised. I was a little surprised. I thought with everything going on, Njoku would want a little more stability right now and then maybe reevaluate in a year. But I get it. And a name we brought up, because I had made the point, I said, thank God the Ravens don't have these problems, whether it's Njoku, any player, Jamal Adams. Never had a player that's so, mouthing off against the team, against the coaches, against management. I guess Bernard Pollard's the only one that would fit that bill, but that was years after he left the team, so I'm not even going to count it. And then Ian brought up Raheem Mostert, who, again, was a practice squad player with the Ravens around 2015, a journeyman, hopped around from practice squad to practice squad, finally found his footing with the 49ers last year, and he said some things. He said, hey, I never got my shot with any of the teams that had me before. The Ravens were included in that group. So that's not really a shot. It's not really, him talking down on the Ravens or anybody. It's just a fact. Like, I said it last week. If I was in his shoes, I would feel the same way. I was bouncing around from practice squad to practice squad, and then I finally get a real chance with the 49ers, and I absolutely go off in the NFC Championship game. Like, he etched his name in the history books. And so now, oddly enough, we're having the conversation about him a week later. He wants out of San Francisco. Wants to be paid more because his contract, he's being paid like a special teams player, but obviously he's being used as a prominent running back. Now they have a running back committee there in San Francisco, so he's not like the true number one running back, but he had a very good second half to last year and a great postseason. So I can understand why you would want more money, but if he gets traded, is he going to get more money? I don't know how this is going to, he wants to get traded to a team and then for them to give him a new contract. I don't know how this is going to work, but I don't know. Not the Ravens' problem, so whatever. We'll move on. I just thought it was funny. His name came up last week when we were talking about Njoku. 1 week later, here he is. He wants out of San Francisco. Speaking of the NFL, NFL has banned jersey swaps after the games. The NFL is planning to play all systems are go for 2020, but apparently after the game, you're not going to have players, exchanging pleasantries, shaking hands, dapping each other up, hugging each other. No jersey swaps. They got to remain 6 feet apart during postgame. I don't know what the hell this is all about. So you're telling me? I think Richard Sherman tweeted this out, and it's just it's a no-brainer. It's so funny. But so stupid at the same time. Like, I think he tweeted something to the effect of, you're telling me after 60 minutes of linemen, getting up in each other's faces, clashing, defenders tackling, running backs and wide receivers, that we're not going to be able to dap each other up after a game? Ridiculous. It's just stupid. Like, this is the NFL being the NFL. This is the NFL being absolutely stupid. Roger Goodell, whoever, the league is going to realize, yeah, that was actually really stupid. It made us look extremely stupid rather than making us look like a proactive organization that's looking out for the health and safety of our players. We just looked like idiots. So I'm expecting that to change. And the last thing, dealing with Terps basketball, Ben Stanley. If you don't know the name, don't worry. He was a college basketball player for Hampton, playing in the Big South. So again, if you haven't heard of Hampton basketball, no surprises there. Plays in the Big South against such tough opponents like Radford and Gardner-Webb and Winthrop, teams that the Terps usually play in their non-conference schedule. We'll just put it like that. But Ben Stanley is a redshirt sophomore. He's entered the transfer portal. He's a forward. If you want to, what type of player he is, he's 6'6", 250 pounds. So he's basically Dante Scott. Dante Scott's an inch taller, but they weigh the same. And he averaged last year with Hampton 22 points a game, 7.2 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks per game. Not too shabby. Again, that's playing in the Big South, though, so the level of competition is nowhere near what you're going to see in the Big Ten. But as a transfer, I think he's enticing. The reason I bring this up, Maryland has thrown their hat in the ring. They have reached out to him. They're trying to get him to come to College Park. Other teams that have reached out include Georgetown, Missouri, and Xavier. So some big-name teams there. But if there is a place where the Terps can get a one-up on the competition here and get him to come to College Park, Ben Stanley is a Baltimore kid. He's from Baltimore, so a local guy. Played at Our Lady of Mount Carmel and Baltimore City College. I think he'd be a good fit. Probably not a starter. Again, the Terps desperately need big men, like tall big men, prototypical forwards and a center, because all they have right now is Shoal Mariel. Everyone else is transferred out, or Jalen Smith is going to the NBA. So, yeah, they desperately need a big man, or they're going to have to play small next year, which I don't think is going to go over well in the Big Ten. But to have another Dante Scott type of player as a rotational piece on the bench, because, again, you did lose some rotational pieces with Ricky Lindo, Sorrell Smith as a guard. You lost him. So, yeah, I think it'd be good to get some depth in here. And 22 points a game, if you want to cut that in half, what he'll contribute in the Big Ten. If he's putting up 10, 11 points a game in the Big Ten as a rotational bench piece, fantastic. If he's putting up 7, 8 points a game in good quality minutes, solid defense, I think the Terps will take that in a heartbeat. But if this tells you anything, Hampton did play a non-conference game against Illinois last year, so Illinois, a fantastic team last year in the Big Ten. This guy, Ben Stanley, put up 20 points on 9 of 18 shooting in that game against Illinois with 5 rebounds, so take that as you will. And yeah, I think that's going to do it. I think I got through everything there. I don't know how this episode's going to sound. It's probably absolute garbage. We will be back next week. Hopefully, all systems go. Ian will be back. I won't have to ramble for an hour by myself. We will definitely get into that Ravens attendance question, because Ian, being a PR or a PSL holder, definitely want to get his thoughts on that. I know in the past he has expressed on the podcast and on social media that he would like to go to games if given the opportunity. So we will reevaluate that a week from now. This was a jam-packed episode, so we'll save something for next week. Thank you for putting up with me. If you listened, let me know how the solo episode went. If it was garbage, tell me it was garbage. If you liked it, please tell me you liked it. I could use the ego boost. But that'll do it. We'll be back next week as normal, and we'll talk to you then.